The news was in people's minds for a day or two, the subject of discussion on the vids, and then it disappeared almost as suddenly as it had first begun. Jinsey had a hard time not thinking it had been deliberately quailed. For a week or two you could find the vid if you looked hard enough, hiding in some of the backwaters of the system. It showed nothing of the assassination itself, since the kill shot had been hidden by the podium. No, you had to be to one side, as Jinsey had been, to see Fisher's head burst and scatter blood and brain. But what you did see was a look of confusion on Istvan's face directly after the shot, a confusion and puzzlement that continued as well after he'd been knocked down and tied up. Jinsey kept whirling the footage back, looking at it, trying to understand exactly what had happened. Was it simply an incaution that Istvan had come out of his fantasy world, was now realizing that the blood and brains were real? Had he convinced himself that the gun, when fired, would do something else? Or had he in fact been told that the gun would do something else? Fire blanks, fire a flag, not fire at all? Was it a question of Istvan's madness, or had he been set up? And more importantly, was there any way in watching the vid to know for certain? After a few dozen viewings, Jinsey guessed not. He realized, never have a clear handle on what had happened to his brother. Yet he could not stop himself from continuing to watch the vid, continuing to hope that this time, by slowing the footage down to a crawl, he'd see something that he had missed before. Henry had shown up shortly after they carted Istvan away, when Jinsey was still standing there at the scene, trying to take in what had happened. I came as fast as I could, he claimed, as soon as I saw it on the vids. I'm so sorry. Without Henry, Jinsey did not know how long he might have gone on understanding their shock. But he let Henry gather him around the shoulders and lead him away. Back in his apartment, he slept the sleep of the dead, not waking up for almost 20 hours. When he did, he found Henry still there, asleep on the couch. Once Henry realized he was awake, he aroused himself and made Jinsey something to eat. I've been asking about him, said Henry, trying to find out what they're going to do with him. Jinsey nodded listlessly. They arrested him, he said. I was there. I saw it. He shot the man. What other choice did they have? Henry shook his head. They took him away, but they didn't arrest him. What? No, he's not at the police station or in any holding facility I could locate, or if he is, they won't tell me. Since you're a relative, you might have better luck. But when he began contacting people, he had the same results, or lack thereof, as Henry. Nobody in the police station admitted any knowledge of Istvan. None of the facilities in the incarceration dome had received him either. But he has to be somewhere, said Jinsey to a prisoner representative on the other end of the line. No doubt he is somewhere, she said acidly, but he isn't here. And then she broke the connection. They tried again. Henry called his father and got him to talk to an acquaintance on the police force. He reported to Jinsey that yes, there had been a man brought in with a bag over his head, surrounded by SCAC forces, but almost as soon as he had arrived, he had been taken away again. He didn't know where or why. This wasn't, he made clear to Henry's dad, standard procedure. The man promised to ask around if he could do so without raising too many hackles, see what he could find out. After that, they didn't know what else to do. They sat silent for a while, trying to come up with other ideas of how to locate Istvan. Maybe they called him, Jinsey finally said, breaking the silence, and then when Henry didn't contradict him, say something, did they? Slowly, Henry shook his head. I don't think so, he said. It doesn't seem like a smart move on their part, particularly with the vids still available. But they seem to be getting rid of the vids. They can't get rid of all the vids of them. They don't know who has them on private systems that could come back to haunt them. It's not in their best interest to kill him unless they're sure he won't be needed later. I don't think they could possibly know that yet, but you think it's possible they kill him? Asked Jinsey. Henry nodded. It's possible, he admitted. He took sick leave. He watched the vids over and over, still looking, still searching for something that would mean anything. If only he tried to keep Istvan from leaving. Maybe if he had been as tired as he was, he'd have managed to do that. But then again, maybe not. Or if he'd asked Istvan more questions, tried to coax what he meant out of him, then, even if he hadn't managed to get him to stay, Jinsey would have more of a sense of what he meant by his purpose and of who they were. Or maybe he couldn't help but think, even though he didn't want to, I couldn't have done anything to make any difference at all. When Henry's father showed up at Jinsey's door, it was only to tell him that his contact hadn't been able to find anything out. Nobody seemed to know anything at all, though it was clear that a higher authority was at work, maybe even that Istvan was no longer on the planet. No longer on the planet, asked Jinsey. But how can he stand trial if he's not here? Henry's father fell silent. He can't, he finally said, and he probably won't. What do you mean won't? He's a political prisoner. An enemy of the state, said Henry's father. The rules don't apply to him in the same way. The laws applies to everybody the same, said Jinsey. Henry's father reached out and squeezed his shoulder. Surely you've been around long enough that you can't actually believe that, he said. Your brother has been taken away somewhere secret, somewhere where the laws don't apply. They'll torture him until he tells them whatever they want to know about why he did what he did. After that, they'll imprison him in an undisclosed location. He gave Jinsey a look of pity. In all likelihood, you'll never see your brother again. But still, even having been told that, he couldn't help but try. He went to the police station, inquired after his brother, and when they turned him away and told him Istvan wasn't there, he simply returned again the next day. He kept coming, they kept turning him away until finally they told him that he couldn't come anymore. He insisted on seeing the chief of police, who also claimed to have no idea what had happened with his brother, claimed that the police had nothing to do with it, but did actually listen to him. When he had finished and the police chief was still shaking his head, Jinsey asked, "Who do I have to talk to next?" The police chief was happy to send him up to the superintendent just to get rid of him. From there he got shuffled between politicians and the military, one sending him to the other and vice versa, for a while like a ricocheting bullet, until finally a councilman named Richard Savage was staring across a table at him and asked him to repeat the story one more time, and once he took pity on him. "Do you have a lawyer?" Savage asked him. Jinsey shook his head. "If you had one," said Savage, "he might be able to cut through some of this red tape." He didn't have enough money for a lawyer, but he got one anyway, a young independent fellow named Lee Tompkins, who was more interested in the politics of the case than in any money he might earn. Even with a lawyer, it took a while, more shunting and shuttling, but finally he and Tompkins were in an office with a military official by the name of Grainon. "What brings you here?" asked Grainon. He had clear, pale eyes and a steady gaze and a stony face that gave very little away. "You know why we're here," said Tompkins, and began to unload signed and stamped forms from his bag. He placed them on the desk, but Grainon ignored them. "We've followed protocol," said Tompkins. "We've done everything that the law requires of us. Now you are required to tell us where this man's brother is." "That information is classified," said Grainon. "We have all the approvals," said Tompkins steadily. "You can't stonewall us." "I'm not stonewalling," said Grainon. "I'm just not in a position to answer your question." He leaned back in his chair, tinted his fingers. "I can admit we have his brother, but he is a political prisoner." "My brother doesn't have a political bone in his body," said Jinsey. Grainon shrugged. "He killed a politician at a public ceremony," he said. "He's political." "It's all a misunderstanding," said Jinsey. "There's something not right about him. He didn't know what he was doing. He shouldn't be in jail. He should be in a facility somewhere where he can get help." "He isn't in jail," said Grainon. "He's in a containment center." "Where?" "I can't say where. That's classified information." "How can you take someone off without even a trial and hide them in a containment center where nobody knows where they are?" Grainon didn't answer. "Is it off-world?" "I can't answer that," said Grainon. "What can you answer?" "I can tell you that we have your brother. I can tell you that he is still alive. I can tell you as well that he will not be released anytime soon, perhaps ever." Jinsey shook his head. "Who else can I talk to?" he asked. "Nobody else," said Grainon. "I'm the end of the line. I'm sorry, but this is as much as you're ever going to know." Jinsey turned to Tompkins. The lawyer nodded. "I'm afraid he's right. Next step is the court. We can file a suit, but it'll take years for it even to get heard. For all intents and purposes, we've run out of possibilities." Jinsey kept trying, even after Tompkins drifted away and on to other cases, but he realized more with each passing day how hopeless it was. Eventually it became almost a hobby, a way of stirring things up a little, even though he knew there was no hope. He returned to picking, slowly started thinking of his brother less and less, though when he did think of him, it was with a twinge of guilt and pain. But he had his own life to live. He had to keep on. Henry just squeaked by in school, then left to work off-world for a while, the plan being to get a job that would let him build up some quick capital and then return and invest in real estate. Jency was sorry to see him go. After that, it was just him and picking and lying around his apartment. Occasionally an evening out with an acquaintance or a friend, or wandering the streets late at night alone, stumbling through endless self-accusations, making vows to himself about what he would do to get his brother back. But part of him wondered if he would ever see his brother again, and deep inside he knew the chances weren't good. He would have to learn to live with that fact. He would have to learn to move forward alone.